Jay here from Stretford, Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, we're live in the studio with all the latest Manchester United news. Apologies for being a bit late. Me and producer Harry were talking about the traitors. But we'll crack on with the Manchester United news because I'm sure that's far more important to some of you. Good to see some people in the chat already, but I'll get to you in a minute. We're going to be talking about these talks that the Glazers, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and the United hierarchy are having in Manchester today. Now, we have to stress that these aren't sort of unplanned talks. This isn't like a reactionary thing to what has gone on, but there is a lot to discuss, including where the club is at following the sacking of Ruben Amorim. So The Athletic covered this story earlier today. I think there was a tweet that went out literally about 40 minutes ago. Laurie Whitwell and Adam Crafton working on a story, or worked on a story, and it just says here, so Jim Ratcliffe, Glazer family, flying to UK for Manchester United Leadership Summit. Now, as far as we know, these meetings take place sort of quite regularly. But it says here, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is flying into Manchester to meet with Joel and Avram Glazer at United's latest executive committee meeting. United's co-owners are set for face-to-face talks, but Windy Pops, at Carrington to discuss the latest developments of the club after Ruben Amorim's dismissal and Michael Carrick's appointment as interim head coach. The location of the summit has been moved to Manchester to avoid upheaval for United's football leadership in this turbulent time. They are usually held in Monaco, and to provide Ratcliffe and the Glazers a chance to speak to Carrick and his staff. So they're going to be having a chat with Michael Carrick. Look, it's not like they're going to be, well, I hope they're not going to be telling him what to do tactically or anything like that. It's probably just, I think for the Glazers, they'll probably finding out who he is. This will be like introducing him for the first time. This is Michael Carrick. You probably never heard of him, even though he's a club legend, because sod all about Manchester United. He's now the head coach here, basically the manager. So they're going to meet him and have a chat with him. It also says it would be the first time Joel and Avram Glazer have visited the new main building at United's training ground, which was built at a cost of 50 million quid, funded by Ratcliffe's investment. The Glazers have not put a penny of their own money into renovating the club's infrastructure since completing their leveraged buyout in 2005, plunging United into hundreds of millions of pounds of debt. We all know that. We know, I'm sure you know my thoughts on the Glazers, but if you don't, I'll tell you. I think they're parasites and I want them gone from my football club. And I think that's a sentiment that many people agree with. The Exco meetings typically take place every month, featuring members of the club's hierarchy and football directors, but this one takes on added importance given the sense of turmoil at United in the wake of Amorim's sudden departure. It also mentions in the article there's a lot of agitation and concern amongst the fan base, with the 1958 group calling for a protest march at Old Trafford ahead of the visit by Fulham on February the 1st. We spoke about that in Paddock Live last night, and as I mentioned on Paddock Live, and I'll mention again, we are going to be speaking to the 1958 on Friday. They're in the studio, or Steve's in the studio for the 1958, so we'll be getting a bit more detail in that. But let me know what you think about this. I mean, look, these meetings take place. They take place every month. There's an added sort of side to it because Ruben Amorim's gone, Michael Carrick's in, he's going to be meeting the Glazers. It feels to me that since Sir Jim Ratcliffe's come in, the Glazers have sort of bothered with the day-to-day running the club even less than they did previously. I mean, they weren't really heavily involved in the past. Now it feels like they're hardly involved at all, other than still being the majority shareholders collectively. I think individually, Jim Ratcliffe might have the most shares of an individual, but collectively, the Glazer family still has the most shares. So let me know what you think about this. Look, we're just in this weird situation at the minute, aren't we, as Manchester United fans, where I think there's a lot of anger towards Ineos. There's always been a lot of anger towards the Glazers, and I get that. There's a lot of frustration at the way things are being run. Very much feels like we've not taken any steps forward since Ineos have come in. We were promised the best in class by Sir Jim Ratcliffe. We were promised that football people were going to be in sort of football positions, which is something that didn't always happen under Glazers, when you had the likes of Ed Woodward, of course, sort of running the show, who came from an investment banker background. But has this translated to better results? Has this translated to the club looking in a better position than it did when Ineos come in? The only sort of positives I could take are the fact we've got a renovated training ground, which is long overdue, and some of the signings we've made under Ineos have been, in my opinion, good ones. But it ain't good enough. And we've not seen enough positives from Ineos since they've come in to make me feel like we're on the right path. Now, I hope we are. I want Manchester United to be successful. That's, I'm a United fan who wants this club and this team to do well. But so far, the evidence doesn't give me any sort of faith in that. I think it's more just sort of hope rather than expectation that they are going to get it right. And we have to remember what we're up against here as well. Manchester United now have fallen so far behind the likes of Arsenal, who've got a manager who's been in there a long time, who have a lot of stability at the club. They've finally paid off the Emirates Stadium. They're able to compete in the transfer market. They've got a good youth policy, which has seen the likes of Ethan Nwaneri come through, Miles Lewis-Skelly, Max Dowman's come through the ranks as well. They've got a very strong youth policy there, making big signings, and a manager they trusted has been there a little while, who seems to be even given even more autonomy now that Edu's moved on. You've got City, who just do whatever they're doing. You've got Pep Guardiola there. I don't know how long he's going to be there, but he's there for the time being. And let's not forget with City, they were winning titles before he arrived, albeit they've got 115 charges hanging over their head. So you could argue that with some merit that they've cheated, but they have won a lot of titles, and we don't even know what's going to happen with those charges, because it just seems to be going on forever. The Scousers, who had a bit of a wobble, didn't this season, but they are the reigning champions. Again, competing in the transfer market, able to do that. Unlike City, Liverpool are a club that generates a lot of money because of the size of them. I think they're only second to Manchester United in terms of the sort of size of the club in England. So they've got their act together to a certain degree. And we've got to play catch up with these clubs. We've got to sort out ourselves and not just get to a level where we're competing, but we're competing against clubs that have sort of been miles ahead of us in many respects. And that's the worry. Is like, can Ineos do that? It isn't going to be a quick fix. And I think that whilst we don't like Ineos, whilst we can sort of criticise him, which I'm going to do, we do need to know, okay, if it's not Ineos, what's the alternative? So the answer to that is I don't know. I think the best solution to this would be if Ineos actually got their act together and started doing things the right way, because so far there's been a lot of missteps. Let me know what you think. Big Cheese 3362 says Penfold. Yes, that is my one of my nicknames after I wore a suit on the channel. I won't be doing that again. Glenn F in the chat, good to see him. Morning, Jay says Heaven Soul. Lots of people saying good morning, good to see you. Let me know what you think about Ineos. All right, let's have a chat. Let's have a discussion. These meetings are all well and good. Like, we expect them to have meetings. I don't know what's going to be said, but you'd imagine it's just sort of Ineos saying, well, this is Michael Carrick. He's the new manager now to the end of the season, or the head coach at the end of the season. Are they going to be talking about anything long term? I don't know. But where do you stand with Ineos? What do you want to see happen? What would be the best option for you guys? Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat. Frederick says, or Fedders says, them charges have gone horribly quiet. Chris Griffey says, Michael Carrick's Red and White Army. Yes, someone last night was calling him Michael Carrick. So Tito the Sizzle says, boycott the channel until Jay gets a suit on full time. Listen, don't be boycotting the channel, and I won't be wearing a suit full time. You know me. We've done a little poll there, so you can give us your thoughts and opinion on Ineos. Man says, Ineos are better than the Glazers, but they are making mistakes. Glazers never learn from them. I hope Ineos can learn. Look, everyone makes mistakes. I get that, and I think that's a fair point. You can make mistakes and learn from them. I've done that in my own life. There has been mistakes. They made a mistake the way they handled Eric Ten Hag. They made a mistake with the way they handled Dan Ashworth and what they did with Dan Ashworth. They made a mistake, really, in bringing Ruben Amorim in. I don't see any positives from his tenure. You could argue that he got rid of a few players that need to be gotten rid of, but even some of them are just on loan. So there isn't a lot of positives there. That feels like a mistake, and it looks like a mistake. So the three of the biggest calls you've made in terms of keeping Ten Hag, that was a bit of a shambles because you kept him and then interviewed other candidates and then ended up sacking him a few months later. You brought in Dan Ashworth, you paid a load of dough to get him, you waited for his gardening leave to finish, you paid compensation to Newcastle, then you ended up sacking him and paying him compensation, or paying off his contract, just poor decision. You bring in Ruben Amorim, he plays a certain way, you don't like the way he plays, you try to get him to change it, he doesn't want to, you end up sacking him. Lots of missteps there. It gets to a point where people aren't going to be forgiving for these mistakes, and we might even be there already, to be honest with you. And we'll see on the first against Fulham the level of anger that people have got towards the ownership. But it doesn't feel like things have improved. It doesn't feel like you can go, well, Ineos came in, things were a mess, and they've turned things around. So far, yes, they've laid off a lot of people. Yes, they've renovated the ground. I mean, laying off a lot of people doesn't even necessarily mean it's a positive thing. That, to a lot of people, looks like a negative. We'll find out further down the line, maybe, if that needed to happen. It certainly doesn't sit well with me, people losing their jobs, people that care about the club as well, because I know some of these people. I'm literally friends with them. I've got members of my own family who've lost their jobs at Manchester United. So I'm never going to be like, yeah, hey, there's been a load of layoffs. But I can stomach it to some degree if it's for the greater good. If you go, look, further down the line, this needed to happen to get this club on an even keel. But so far, we're not seeing that. And also, some of the decisions to save money just seem just ridiculous. Cutting the Christmas bonus and getting rid of free meals. I mean, how much money are you saving there? It just feels like bad PR. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat. Santa Notch, I'm interested to hear what Notch has got to say. I'm still convinced it was the Glazers who ordered the sacking of Amorim and not Ineos alone. He ultimately publicly criticised the way the club is run, which looks bad on the owners. Fair enough, Notch. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think that's a fair comment. Let me know, do you agree? I don't know, but it might well have been the Glazers. They don't take a lot of interest in Manchester United, but they might get wind of the managers or the head coaches saying things that are detrimental, or they feel are detrimental to their ownership of the club. Wouldn't surprise me. Could have been the Glazers. They could have stuck their nose in. Would Sir Jim Ratcliffe have pushed back on that? Would he have been like, no, we've got to stick with this guy? For me, it feels like it was a Wilcox thing with Amorim. I think that was the key. I think that's what went wrong. I think there was a sort of argument, discussion, disagreement between Amorim and Wilcox, and that was the certain... If that's not the one that sort of... That was the be-all and end-all. That's certainly what started all this. And maybe Wilcox has spoken to Ratcliffe, or maybe the Glazers have seen this as well. But it felt like that meeting between Amorim and Wilcox was the sort of... the reason, ultimately, why Ruben Amorim lost his job. Let me know what you think. I mean, either way, it's a bit of a mess. Sorry, I'm trying to read for some of these comments. Melissa Stack says the mistake wasn't hiring Amorim. It was not giving him time or backing as was promised, and then sacking him when they did. The thing is, right, it's a weird one with Ruben Amorim because the results by and large were terrible and the performances weren't much better. But the whole argument to bringing him in was, look, he's going to play a certain way. We probably don't have the players to play the way he wants to play. So you're going to have to bring in players. It's one of the reasons Liverpool didn't hire him, because they looked at him and they thought, if he wants to play, 3-4-2-1, we don't have the squad for that. We're going to have to change that. It's probably going to cost a lot of money to do that. We won't go with him. Now, ironically, Liverpool probably bought in players that do fit in a Ruben Amorim system. Look at someone like Jeremy Frimpong, for example. He seems like tailor-made for a Ruben Amorim system. However, Ruben Amorim comes in and he sticks to his guns. And it's like, look, this is my system. We are going to play this way. I don't care if Kobbie Mainoo is dropped. I don't care if we have to heavily rely on Casemiro, who can only play an hour of football most weeks. I don't give a toss. This is my system. We are sticking with it, right? Now, I didn't agree with it. I didn't think it was working. I didn't particularly like it. But I understood that is what made him successful at Sporting. That was the way he wanted to play. That was what he was using at Manchester United. So you think, right, okay, then his one saving grace would be, you could argue, would be like, look, this is it. We're going to stick with this. And once we've got the players in that fit this system, things will turn around. But then when it got to the point where it felt like the hierarchy were going, look, this just isn't working. The results aren't good enough. So he changed it against Newcastle, then changed it back against Wolves. We draw with Wolves, and that felt like the end game, really. Now, should he have changed it against Newcastle? Should he have stuck to his guns and gone, no? Because that kind of undid him, didn't it? Because once you got that win against Newcastle, it was kind of like, well, you've won with this foot forward at the back. You need to do that all the time. And he didn't want to. It's just a mess, man. It just really is. I'm so deflated in a minute with what's going on at Manchester United. And, you know, I love Michael Carrick, but I think he's on a bit of a hiding to nothing. Check out the merchandise. There's a link in the chat to the Stretford Paddock store. Brian Casey says, didn't like seeing the images of Wilcox standing on the sidelines for Carrick's first training session after his comments about meddling. He shouldn't be anywhere near the squad. I get your point there, Brian, to be honest with you. It does feel like there's a lot of meddling going on for Jason Wilcox. And look, Jason Wilcox did well at City's Academy. That doesn't mean he should be managing Manchester United. I don't like the idea that he's involved in the management of Manchester United. If he's going to be director of football, go and do that director of football. Let the manager manage, or the head coach. On our poll, Ineos, get them out. Don't mind them. Like them. 55% get them out. 38% don't mind them. 7% like them. I mean, not many liking them, really. Heaven Soul says he needs to understand his lane and stick to it. We'll be better off as a result. That's talking about Jason Wilcox. A lot of pressure at the minute on Jason Wilcox, you know. I feel like the fan base have had enough of him already. I feel like Jason Wilcox has become the sort of lightning rod for a lot of anger from the fans, and I get it. I understand why. And he doesn't have the luxury of being a United legend where you might give him a bit of leeway, or you might think, oh, well, you know, just lay off him a bit because look at what he's done at United. He's not. The only title he won was beating Manchester United to the title in 1995 whilst playing for Blackburn. He comes from Leeds now. You can come from Leeds and come to United. Eric Cantona did it, but it's not exactly tailor-made for you to come from a club where people go, oh, we like it because he was at Leeds. No. So, and also he's been at City. Now, you can't dine out on the fact you did well at City's Academy forever. To a lot of United fans like myself, that almost doesn't matter. What I want to see is what you're doing at Manchester United, and so far what you've been doing at Manchester United is shambolic. Let me know what you think. Dan United 94 says, people are overlooking the fact that Wilcox was never hired as director of football. He came in as technical director and was only pushed into the main job because of Ashworth thing imploded. Wilcox out of his depth. That's a good point. There was meant to be, Joe mentioned it last night, it was meant to be this trifecta, wasn't it? It was Barada, Wilcox, Ashworth working together. People with a footballing background. Barada had come from City. Wilcox, obviously a former player and had been at City, been at Southampton, and we know his footballing pedigree. Dan Ashworth, who was lauded as this sort of almost like genius type figure. I think he'd been at the FA and done good things there. I think he'd been at Brighton and Newcastle, and he had a really good reputation. So they were all going to work together, and it's like Dan Ashworth gets moved out, he's gone. Wilcox is almost sort of promoted, and it feels like everything is just funneled through Jason Wilcox now, maybe with Barada sort of, alongside him. Jim Ratcliffe does the interview he did a few months ago where he spoke about, Jason Wilcox's eyes as being almost like the key to everything. And you're like, what are you on about? What's going on? Is this just the case that Jason Wilcox has Jim Ratcliffe's ear? Is that what it is? That Jason Wilcox and Jim Ratcliffe get on, so Jim Ratcliffe likes Jason Wilcox, rates him, they have a good relationship, and that's what's keeping Jason Wilcox in a job and his head above water with all these shenanigans that are going on because him and Jim Ratcliffe get on. If that's the case, that's poor. You need to be in a job because you're the best in classes. That's what we were told. You're the best in class. You're going to get the job at United because of that. You can, do a good job for Manchester United, not because you get on really well with one of the owners. Let me know what you think. Kev84MG, Wilcox only came out and communicated with the fans. This is a great point. When we won 3 games in a row, we deserve to know what's going on. He did, didn't he? He came out after the October where we beat Liverpool, we beat Sunderland, and we beat Brighton. We had that run, didn't we, where Ruben Amorim got manager of the month, Brian Mbeumo player of the month, and then all of a sudden Jason Wilcox is giving interviews, walking around the training ground, giving interviews and all the rest of it, talking about how the plan and the transfers and everything sort of coming to fruition. It's all right doing that when things are going well, but when things aren't going well, you need to come out and speak about it. You need to sort of reassure some of the fans, because the fans right now are looking at you going, what is going on? You've got to take some responsibility, and it's no good just doing victory laps when we've won a few games. Come out and speak to us. That is one of the biggest criticisms, not the only criticism. It's one of the criticisms we had at Glazers. Not only did they cost us a lot of money and drain this club and put us in all this debt and obviously not give a toss about the club and pay themselves all these dividends and take out all these loans, but also there was zero communication. Now, if you see them in Florida when they've got shares in the NFL team, whose name I've already forgotten, they do interviews. They speak to the media. You don't see that at Manchester United. When we protested ahead of the Liverpool game, there was going to be this dialogue. I think there was one Zoom call, was there, maybe, with one of them? But there's been no communication. Now, look, that's not the be-all and end-all. I'd still hate him even if they communicated with us. But you at least want a bit of dialogue from Ineos. We were told we were going to have that. We ain't getting it, really. Giving interviews when you've won a few games doesn't do anyone any good. Doesn't do United fans any good. It doesn't do Jason Wilcox any good. Glenn F says, missed my chat twice. Wilcox is responsible. All right, calm down. Is responsible for getting rid of Amorim. We were in 6th, missing the AFCON players, and he was the first manager to have us on an upward trajectory since 2013. I don't know about that. There's been spells when we have been on an upward trajectory in the past, however, it hasn't worked out. Sarge Hulge back says, I doubt Ineos' intentions, but fact is Glazers held Champions League qualifications, sacrosanct, and a long-term rebuild Ineos are doing has us finishing 15th. Yep, I get that. Yeah, someone's saying I missed that chat. I've read that out. We have reached a tipping point, says LAJAP. United, no matter the coach manager, are playing under the weight of enormous anxiety, and that will only disappear with a fresh ownership. Yeah, I agree with that. Let's just whiz through some of the other stories as well. We spent a long time talking about Jason Wilcox in this meeting and Ineos and all the rest of it. Bruno Fernandes isn't going anywhere, much like Manchester United at the minute. So Simon Stone in the BBC says, Manchester United captain Bruno Fernandes is not planning to seek a move away from the club this month. I didn't think he would. That would be a disaster if he left in January. I'm sure we're going to revisit this in the summer. We'll see what happens with Bruno Fernandes, but at the minute, he is staying, and we need him. It says there as well, Fernandes met one of Amorim's coaches, Carlos Fernandes, in the wake of Amorim's sacking, heightening fears for some that the 31-year-old might be looking for an exit route. Doesn't seem like that is the case. We'll see longer term what happens. Bruno Fernandes and Bayern Munich. What's this one? Bayern Munich is showing a strong interest in Bruno Fernandes, and a move to Germany remains a real possibility. That could appeal to him. He's still got a lot to offer. I think the German league, when you're at Bayern, is a lot easier than being in the Premier League. We've seen Harry Kane go in there. Was he 29 when he went there? Harry Kane, maybe 30, and he's smashed it. I think Bruno Fernandes could smash it in that league, and he could win things, win a title, maybe even a Champions League. He's got a better chance of winning a Champions League at Bayern Munich than he has at Manchester United, let's be frank. So one to keep an eye on. Hopefully it doesn't happen. I still love Bruno Fernandes and don't want him to go anywhere. Let's talk about left wing situation. Manchester United are exploring a move to sign a new left winger on loan in this month's transfer window. A left-sided winger is the recruitment team's top priority this month if they can find the right profile. This is by Peter O'Rourke. He's got quite a following on socials. I think he does stuff for Football Insider. One to keep an eye on. Just another couple of ones. Michael Carrick and his coaches have been in training. If you scroll down, I think we should have... Is there some pictures there? So you can see him there in training. I mean, look, it's nothing new to him. Yeah, thank you. Is that Kobe Mainoo there? Yeah. Thank you, producer, just pointing that out to me. I wondered who that was. I've never seen him before. Thanks for that. So this is United, is it? Manchester United. That's Michael Carrick, yeah? Carrot, sorry, Michael Carrot and some other lad. Kobe Mainoo or something, I don't know. Thanks for that. Yeah, you can see him. Look, you know, training session pictures tell you nothing. But he's obviously training with the squad. He's got his work cut out. Good to see Ahmad in there as well, and Brian and Bumo back from the AFCON. We need them this weekend. Let's just talk about one final one, Edison Castillo. So this is apparently United are into new Moises Caicedo. Is a new Ecuadorian midfielder there. You can see him, Edison Castillo. Keep an eye on it. We'll see what's happening. It's one that story from the Mirror covers a lot of things. It's like talking about what's happening with Kobe Mainoo, talking about us being in for who's the lad from Dortmund? Sorry, Adeyemi. Thank you. Which I don't think is going to happen, but you never know. So the Mirror sort of doing a little bit of a roundup there. We'll let you know if anything happens with that. I think at the minute there's not much happening transfer wise. I think the focus is on the squad we've got. Michael Carrick coming in, working with that squad, and trying to get us Champions League football. I'm going to leave it there. Joe James John says, butter carrot. I like that. If you know, you know. We're going to be back later on today. We've got Off the Bar. I think that's me, Macola, Howson, and Joseph, of course. Check out the merchandise. There's a link in the chat and a link in the description as well. Don't forget, if you're not doing so already, to hit like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jay Marty. This has been The Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.